Welcome to Accenture's Insurance News Analysis January 2021 edition. Hello and welcome to the first news analysis of a new year. With me, Natalie De Freitas, I'll be interviewing Accenture's Global Insurance Lead, Kenneth Saldanha, for his views behind the biggest insurance news stories so far. Happy New Year. As we start a new year, that's exactly where I wanted to pick up with you. You blogged just before we went off on holiday about the 5 predictions that you see for the insurance industry. And I'd love to talk about all 5, but I will just pick on a few today. You asked, you're urging the industry to get real about inclusion and diversity. And Reuters have run a story that US insurers in particular have a real lack of racial or ethnic minorities at the top of the business. And we are seeing insurers doing more to attract more diverse candidates. What can insurers do to make more meaningful strides to become more inclusive and diverse?
Yeah, well, Natalie, first off, Happy New Year to you as well. And, we're looking forward to a very optimistic start to the year in 2021. So this is a great topic to launch that with, right? Because I think this topic was so central to what we saw socially in the US and really globally last year. This feels like the right topic for us to actually look forward to with some optimism into the new year, right? In terms of the story that Reuters ran, I thought it was an interesting story because it touched on a couple of elements of this, both the executive leadership point as well as the day-to-day experience of employees through their frontline managers. And I think, in terms of where can companies make real progress in 2021, both those topics feel very real. On the one hand, the executive positions, the leadership positions really are critical to setting that overall corporate culture and the face to the market. But on the basis of what is an employee's day-to-day experience, very often it's that frontline manager that really sets the tone and can really change what that experience is like. And so I think both those areas become really important topics for insurers to move on, and I think they will move on them. Everything that we see our insurers talking about, our clients talking about, recognizes the criticality of these issues. That's internally, right? You look at the executives, you look at your frontline managers. I think there's also going to be a continued acceleration to make sure that customers see themselves represented in their insurance companies. And so particularly in those roles where you are interacting more with the customers, so claims, agency and distribution, I think we're going to see continued acceleration of hiring and reflecting that profile in the employee base and in the leadership of those functions. That's always been true to some degree for agency. I think there's been a very deliberate effort by insurers to make sure that they have the profile of their customers reflected in their agents. I think that's going to continue to be a critical issue for the market-facing side of this as well, right? And I think finally, to really make progress in 2021, we can't wait until the executive leadership teams and all of our frontline managers perfectly reflect the demographics of what we'd like them to be, which is why I think it becomes so critical to enroll all of the leaders as they stand today in making this a critical issue for them and a rallying cry for them. And it's certainly something that we are making an important change of in our own, the way we run the insurance sector and how our leaders conduct themselves. And I think it's something that is going to be really seen across the industry and certainly in insurance as well. All of which says, there are very specific things that we expect to see in 2021 that will, in fact, be a change in trajectory for this topic, which I think is a really good sign for the industry and for our society in general.
It really does feel like a change. We at Accenture are embodying change, and so are our clients. So I look forward to 2021 and all the meaningful change that we expect to happen. Another point that you blog about is sustainability and the issue of climate change. And last year we also saw Lloyd's of London announce that they are going to reduce their exposure to coal and oil sand businesses. I mean, do you, in 2021 and beyond, do you see a more sustainable insurance and reinsurance marketplace in the future?
So first off, Natalie, just from a very personal experience, right? Literally in the closing weeks of the year, in the first 3 weeks of December, I was part of 2 conversations with insurers who actually came to us asking about sustainability as a entirely standalone strategic initiative, right? Not buried into one of a portfolio, but truly saying we need to talk about sustainability in all of its elements, right? Whether it's how they write business in the market, what they're doing internally, etc. So I can vouch personally for the fact that there are market forces that are actually pushing this issue to the top of the agenda. And it's, again, in terms of a hopeful start to 2021, it was great to sort of initiate conversations that really are focused on an issue like sustainability, like climate change, with insurers as major initiatives for them, right? Now, the good news is, particularly as it relates to the story around fossil fuels versus sustainable energy, this is not just some altruistic movement by insurers, right? Fundamentally, the changes in the energy industry are here to stay. We are seeing much more focus, many more enterprises that are focused on sustainable energy. And insurers are going to absolutely create the products and services to actually support those new energy players in those sectors. So I think there's actually substantial market pressure to actually meet the pace of what's happening in the energy sector broadly. So the insurers are absolutely going to do that. So I love the fact that we've got this push-pull factor going in the industry right now. There's certainly the market forces pulling the insurance industry towards these sustainable energy companies about their own practices. And on the flip side, we're also seeing the push from internal leadership saying these are critical issues, they're standalone strategic issues. We want to actually move forward on them in meaningful ways. And those both are coming together, I think, for this change in the industry.
That's a really, really good point, that it's far beyond altruism. And we've talked a lot about climate change being that risk that is going to perhaps even outlive this pandemic, and it's going to really shift risk models. So really interesting to hear you talk about that. This year, we'll also see the rollout of 5G gather momentum. Kenneth, we've talked a lot about the expanded attack surface from the transition to remote work. Is the insurance industry ready for 5G, ready for the swathes of data that will come in from devices? And do they have the kind of cyber offerings in commercial and personal lines of insurance that will be needed to meet this new demand?
Yeah, so this is a great example, Natalie. There's no free lunch, right? On the one hand, the 5G migration or the move into 5G is going to unlock a massive amount of opportunity in connected devices and IoT offerings and all of the things that we've been seeing already because of the richness and the depth of data that can now flow through these networks, right? So I think the insurance industry has a lot of upside, simply in terms of the existing opportunities now getting expanded with the data that runs through 5G. Now, with that comes the responsibility on the cyber side, right? And so on the security side. And I think that's absolutely the case, that insurers are keenly aware of the risks that are going to be increasingly exposed with that level of data running through the system, right? Now, we've worked with a number of cyber insurance carriers, and the good news is, really relative to other segments of insurance, cyber has always been a very, very dynamic sector, right? And so cyber insurance companies, cyber insurers, have already been, very nimble to say, okay, what's changing here? I mean, last year we saw insurers having to make major changes on pricing, on exposure, on product features for all the changes in ransomware, right? Because that became the attack that was most prevalent, and it was going after, healthcare companies. We all heard about that. We've seen now the SolarWinds energy issue that's emerged as well. So ransomware and all of these topics are things that the cyber insurance companies are very attuned to pivoting to very quickly. So I don't think 5G will be a fundamentally different force for them. I think it's essentially the next wave in what is a fairly long tidal pattern, right? That this is just the pace of change and what has to happen in the sector.
And I'm sure the rollout of 5G will take a long time, as in all pockets of the world. So I'm sure different markets will respond completely differently. So really interesting to hear you talk about that. Finally, last year we discussed a lot about the industry making lots of tech-driven partnerships. Insurance Business ran a feature asking whether in 2021 and in a world beyond the pandemic when we get there, whether these relationships will last. What do you think about that? What kind of partnerships will we see in a post-pandemic environment?
Yeah, Natalie, to me, this is it's actually a much bigger and more exciting thing than partnerships. If I look at what we see in the sector, right? Yes, there are lots of partnerships. I think this article talked about the data and analytics partnerships, but whether it's the digital distribution elements, data and analytics, even some of the connected devices, et cetera, that we've been talking about, telematics, et cetera, those partnerships certainly have been in play. They have brought innovation to how insurers are actually operating the company. And I think that's been exciting, and it's changed what the offerings are, and it's a substantial change in the industry. What I think is more exciting, though, and what I think is going to be more what we see in 21 and 22 is going to be this notion of convergence. And this is another topic that we've talked about quite a bit. But this is, to me, it's not about the partnerships that are driving, what's happening operationally. It's fundamentally these convergence opportunities that are bringing together sectors in brand new ways. And insurance is going to participate heavily in those. I think we've all heard, our CEO, Julie Sweet, talk about, every business is a health business, right? So we see a lot of insurance companies working in convergence with health companies. Auto insurers have always worked in tandem with insurers. We're going to see more of that convergence as we go more and more into autonomous vehicles and the changes that are happening. So I think it's those kinds of convergence opportunities, right? Whether it's health, financial services, aging services, the auto industry. We just talked about the energy sector, so sustainable energy with insurance. I think it's that convergence that becomes a much more exciting and frankly a bigger deal than the operational partnerships, which, by the way, to answer your question, first of all, it's not going to go away. You're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. Those innovations are here to stay, but I think they're actually, just a first step of a much broader and exciting set of convergence opportunities that we're going to see in insurance.
Kenneth, fascinating as ever. Thank you very much for your time.